Yeah, we back. Yeah, we back. Now, today, man, we're going to be talking about the conflict in Sudan, right? Now, today's video is going to be a follow-up video to one I dropped last night entitled, Arab says Neferkari Dessalines is a coward. So, yeah, we're going to be talking about, Arab imperialism, right? That's the topic we don't really talk about. We love to talk about European colonialism. We love to talk about the settlers, the Dutch settlers in South Africa. But for whatever reason, we never want to talk about the Arab invaders in North Africa, Northeast Africa. For whatever reason, I don't know why we scared to talk about it. Why are they so special? Why we can't talk about the Arab invaders? We could talk about the Dutch settlers. We could talk about the British and the French and the Americans. Why can't we talk about the men from the Arabian Peninsula? God damn it, I'm going to talk about it. If nobody want to talk about it, I'm going to talk about it. Yes, I understand that it's more easy to focus all our attention on the Western powers, the Europeans who came to our territories and invaded our lands and left our nations in turmoil. I understand, right? The Western world often takes center stage when we talk about the history of our people, right? But we must never forget that there is another group of men that has always been just as persistent and just as ruthless and just as harmful to the black man throughout the ages. And I'm talking about the men from the Arabian Peninsula. Now, as you can see, this headline came out sometime today. The Sudanese Army finds that weapons supplied from the UAE were being supplied to the RSF rebels. Now, the RSF rebels, also known as the Rapid Support Forces, is a paramilitary group in Sudan, a group of bandits and barbarians that carry out genocide in Sudan, comprised mainly of men of mixed Arab and African lineage, who enforce a violent Arab supremacist ideology targeting black African men and women, who are currently engaged in a fight against the government, mainly to control land and resources and territory and things like that. And, essentially, these guys think they're Arabs. These guys think they're Arabs, even though the real Arabs in the Middle East, they don't really claim them as the real deal, right? They'll be like, you're just a stupid monkey. But they think they're Arabs at the end of the day, right? They think they're on the same level as the men from Saudi Arabia and things like that. But these guys, it's really some clowns, to be honest with you. Just a bunch of hybrid lunatics that really want to be down with their father's side of the family. And instead of living in peace and harmony with the native Africans on the landmass, they would rather team up and join forces with the men from the UAE and the Arabian Peninsula to destroy the blacks on the continent. Now, let's continue. The Sudanese army seizes weapons from the UAE being shipped to the RSF. The Sudanese armed forces claim to have discovered Emirati ammunition and medical supplies in the possession of the paramilitary group, the Rapid Support Forces, after recapturing the strategic Jebel Moya axis, a critical junction connecting the eastern states to central Sudan. The discovered ammo boxes are marked with UAE military addresses. It appears the RSF attempted to scrub the information from the containers, but did not complete the job. Some 20,000 Sudanese have been killed since the 15th of April 2023, but some estimates put the death toll as high as 150,000. Over 10 million have been displaced internally and 2 million forced to flee abroad, creating the world's largest displacement crisis. More than half of the country's 50 million population is acutely hungry. Food security experts warn that up to 2.5 million people in the country may die from hunger before the end of 2024. The United Nations has accused foreign players of prolonging the war in Sudan, making it harder for the country to find peace. The fighting between the Sudanese armed forces and the RSF started in April 2023, and it was sparked by two generals competing for power after a failed political transition. Since then, the conflict has taken on a regional and international dimension. Several external actors are supporting the two warring parties with arms, ammunition, and money. The United Arab Emirates is emerging as one of the foreign players most invested in the war. It views resource-rich, strategically located Sudan as an opportunity to expand its influence and control in the Middle East and East Africa. Arabs doing what they've been doing for goddamn almost 2,000 years now. Let's continue. Since 2018, the UAE has invested over $6 billion in the country. This includes foreign reserves in the Sudanese Central Bank, agriculture projects, and a Red Sea port. The UAE has also recruited and paid fighters from Sudan, drawn mostly from the RSF, to join its conflict in Yemen. Man, the Arab man still weaponizing and utilizing his hybrid descendants to go fight in his military conflicts. Man, I'm telling you, some things never change, bro. Some things never change, even after thousands of years. Now, let's continue, man. Let's talk about this. Now, in my last few videos, I spoke about how foreign groups of men, particularly the Arabs and the Europeans, would use intermarriage and intermixing as a form of conquest, or to gain a foothold or a stranglehold in a region. And I spoke about the Arab invasions, the Arab conquest of North Africa, right? And the Arab expansion also hit Sudan back in the day too, but Sudan is a special case because they couldn't drive the black man out of Sudan, right? You see, they drove the black man out of a lot of parts of North Africa, but in Sudan, they couldn't drive the black man out. So the black man is still there, still to this day. Take a look up on the screen. Between 639 and 641, the Muslim Arabs conquered Byzantine Egypt. In 641 or 642, and again in 652, they invaded Nubia, but they were repelled, making the Nubians one of the few who managed to defeat the Arabs during the Islamic expansion. Now, round of applause for the ancestors that smacked the fuck out the Arabs when they tried to invade the territory, you know what I'm saying? Put their foot in their ass, you know what I mean? Stomp them Arabs out back in 652, you feel me? Shout out to the forefathers, man, who smacked the fuck out the Arabs. Let's continue. Afterwards, the Mercurian king and the Arabs agreed on the Baht, a unique non-aggression pact that also included an annual exchange of gifts, thus acknowledging Mercuria's independence. While the Arabs failed to conquer Nubia, they began to settle east of the Nile River, where they eventually founded several port towns and intermarried with the local Beja. Now, what did I mention in the videos in the past couple of days, right? How they use intermixing and intermarriage as a form of conquest, right? When they tried brute military force, the black man smacked the fuck out of them, right? So they went another way, right? There's different methods of warfare and conquest, right? You can establish trade relations, you can just come in guns blazing with the military, or you can, intermix with the local population, blend in, assimilate, try to usurp power by becoming one with the local people, right? So the Arabs utilize all of the above, right? All methods of conquest, all methods of warfare, the Arabs have deployed against the black man throughout history. Now, like I said before, I want to pay homage. I want to tip my hat. I want to give a shout out to the black men of Sudan for always standing their ground still to this day, right? Because when the Arab invaders swept across North Africa, right? When them barbarians swept across North Africa, a lot of black men, a lot of black men were driven out of many parts of North Africa, right? They were driven out. They were erased, right? Their lands were overtaken, by the Arabs, and the black man's presence in areas like Libya, Algeria, Tunisia, it was diminished. It was destroyed, right? Because of these Arab invaders. We gotta tell it like it is, man. If we talk about the Dutch settlers in South Africa, how come we can't talk about the Arab invaders of the North? So, but the black men of Sudan, right? The descendants of the ancient Nubian kingdoms, they never surrendered their land, man. They never surrendered their culture, bro. Well, they kind of embraced Arab culture, some of them, but they never surrendered their land, for over 1,000 years. They faced various invaders, Arab settlers, hybrid mixed race offspring that came to subdue them and overtake them. But they always stood their ground through war, through colonization, through modern conflict, still to this day. So the black men of Sudan, man, shout out to my brothers, man. The Arabs tried something similar in West Africa, right? They tried to do the same thing in West Africa, but they also got driven out. They also got beaten back. So shout out to the forefathers on the west coast of Africa that also stood their ground against the Arabs, man. We got to talk about these things, man. We got to talk about these things. We got to talk about how we smacked the fuck out these niggas back in the day. Now, back to the topic at hand, right? The UAE has been caught red-handed supplying weapons to these savages that has been causing mayhem and chaos in Sudan for the past year. Now, where do I even begin? Right? I mean, now when we examine the RSF, these guys, simple and plain, these guys are Arab supremacists. The RSF, the Rapid Support Forces, whatever they call themselves, they are Arab supremacists. And we already know what comes along with that, right? Slavery, racism, bigotry, anti-black hatred. And bro, I'm telling you, the whole nine, the whole shebang, right? These men are our enemies. Like, these men are our enemies. They view the black man as their natural enemy. And in the spirit of reciprocity, we should view them as our enemy also. But the most wicked part about it is these men aren't even real Arabs like that, right? These, like I said, these men are a hybrid race. A lot of these guys in the RSF, they're not real, pure blood Arabs like that, bro. You're a hybrid, you're basically a multi-generational mixed person, to be honest, right? But instead of having mixed European African ancestry, you have African Arab ancestry. And when I examine groups like the RSF, right, these Arab supremacist paramilitary groups, it really reminds me of the Arab invaders from centuries ago and their hybrid offspring who are enforcing these Arab supremacist ideologies by the force of arms, right? These guys are like the modern day enforcers of Arab supremacy that goes back to the 7th century, fighting to maintain a legacy of Arab dominance over the land that belongs to the black man. So when I observe this conflict, I don't really see it as an isolated incident or isolated event, right? I could connect it back to when these men first arrived from the Arabian Peninsula over 1,000 years ago, when they came as merchants and settlers and nomads and invaders, right? And barbarians and savages and criminals. And of course, like we mentioned before, they were not able to militarily conquer the black man in Sudan. So they decided to employ the second strategy, which is, intermarriage, intermixing, assimilation, try to pass down their culture onto the region. So of course, over the course of many centuries, these men intermarried with local African women, not out of love or respect, no, but out of a desire to cement their presence, cement their influence, and cement their control over the land. And from there, you get these hybrid offspring, right? These Afro-Arab offspring, a lot of them carrying on the legacy and mentality of their forefathers, which is Arab supremacy. So when I look at guys like the RSF, I look at them as simply as an extension of that lineage. Now, let's jump into some of these news clips, and I'm gonna jump in and out with my commentary. Let's go.
Over the last year during the war in Sudan, the RSF have targeted members of African tribal groups, including the Masalit, who claim Darfur as their ancestral land. Many of the RSF belong to tribes which, unlike the Masalit, claim Arab ancestry.
Now, in that video, they said that the RSF is known to target native African populations for their ancestral lands. Now, as you can see, these men have the same mentality as their forefathers that arrived in the region centuries and centuries ago, right? Coming to dispossess the black man of his ancestral lands. That same mentality of the early invaders, it's still alive in the minds of the hybrid descendants, right? In the minds of the hybrid offspring. Men who carry both the Arab blood and the African blood, but they identify themselves with their Arab lineage, right? With their Arab forefathers from centuries ago. Now, of course, their presentation may be different. They got modern uniforms, they ride in trucks, they got machine guns, but it's the same invaders from centuries ago, bro. It's the same mentality and ideology from centuries ago. It hasn't changed. Only the methods have changed. Only the methods of warfare have changed. Now let's continue.
Civilians were targeted and where women were being sold from slave houses.
There were RSF soldiers outside, and they beat me until they forced me into the building. Inside, I saw 9 or 10 girls, some without clothes. They told us they will sell us very cheaply. They said, "We kill all the men. We will not leave any black skin here. You have to leave. Get out." They said they will be the only ones to sleep with us, because if we have our own children, our sons will one day take revenge.
Now, the lady right there who was giving the interview, she said something very interesting that stuck out to me, right? Besides the fact that she had mentioned that these guys were selling black women into slavery in the modern day, what also stuck out to me was they said, "We will kill all the men. We will not leave any black skin here." They said they will be the only ones to sleep with us, because if they allow us to have our own children with our black men, then those children will grow up and take vengeance against us. Now, once again, as you can see, the weaponization of intermixing to enforce cultural supremacy. And for those of us who study history, we understand that our adversaries, whether they be the Europeans or the Arabs, they have consistently used this weapon against us, right? Going back centuries to take control of our lands, erase our identity, strip us of our legacy, and turn their hybrid mixed race offspring into tools to advance their own economic or political agendas. Now, in this video, you see a black Sudanese woman giving an interview, right? And she said how these RSF soldiers, these Arab identified, militiamen, said that she could only have children with them, right? Because in their words, if she had children with the native black African man, those children would grow up with the strength and the knowledge and the spirit to take revenge upon those who had harmed their forefathers, those who had harmed their people, right? Which, to be honest, is pretty accurate, right? When you examine all the movements across the world, the revolutions, all the great rebellions, all the great times the black man defended his territory and his sovereignty, that was done by black men who, you know, had black mothers and black fathers. It wasn't really done by the hybrid mixed race offspring, right? It was the black man with the black mother and the black father. It was us who always stood tall against the adversary. It was us who always stood tall against evil. It was us who always defended our sovereignty. It was us who defended our women and children. It was us. It's us who they fear, right? They don't fear the hybrid mixed race offspring. They know he's a tool, he's a pawn. They know it's us, the offspring raised by the black man. They know he's going to be the one to take vengeance for the harm done to his people. They know it. They know it. They know that by eliminating the black father, they eliminate the black child's link to his history, his legacy, his right to justice. They know it, bro. The black father that passes down the lessons of resistance and retribution and survival. The father, the one that ensures the child knows where they come from and who the enemies are, bro. They know that. That's why these Arab identified, RSF soldiers, they want to take the father out of the equation. They want to eliminate the black man from the equation, right? They know that they can raise a new generation of children in Arab supremacist ideology, right? To be foot soldiers for their agenda, to be foot soldiers for their cause, right? Man, I'm telling you, this tactic of intermixing by forcing black women to bear the children of their enemies, this is a weapon that has been used for centuries, bro. For centuries by the Arabs and the Europeans. But anyways, man, let's continue.
Survivor after survivor told CNN how the RSF spoke of wiping out the African descendant Masalit. It's Masalit ancestral land in Darfur that the RSF are currently occupying. Part of a fertile landmass that the commander of the RSF has been strategically looking to secure for the last 20 years, changing the demographics from African to Arab.
Now, let's take a look at some of the conversation happening on social media. This brother said, explaining Sudanese racism to outsiders is absurd. An Islamicized dude from Sudan, darker than a Mwangi from Nairi, and hair texture that meets Somali Jarir test, thinks that he belongs on the same table as the Saudis and derives his self-worth from crapping on Nilotes and sub-Saharan Africans. Now, like I said, when these men weaponize intermixing against the black man, they create these caste systems, these racial caste systems with themselves at the top, right? Same things the Europeans did, with themselves at the top, their hybrid offspring in the middle, and the black man and the black woman at the very bottom. And typically their hybrid offspring who is in the middle will serve as a vassal to defend their interests, even if they can't physically be there to defend it themselves. Now let's continue. This brother said, there were 2 Sudanese security guards in my job. One was a mixed light-skinned dude and the other was jet black. They lived in the same area. I always gave the light-skinned dude rides home because he didn't own a car. One day I asked him how come he doesn't ride with the other Sudanese, and he told me that it was complicated. So I asked the darker skinned dude why he's not cool with his fellow countrymen or give him rides. He told me that if they were back home, that dude would try to kill him. I was dumbfounded. That was my first encounter with the Sudan conflict. God damn, man. Like I said, man. Weaponizing, intermixing against the black man. We got to study our history, man. We got to study our history. Let's continue. This person said, Sudanese culture is interesting. They have a weird racial hierarchy. Arabs at the top, Sudanese Arabs in the middle, and Sudanese Africans on the bottom. Like I said before. This person said, many Sudan tribes are Arab. Multiple Arab tribes migrated to the region centuries ago, and they traced their lineages to them. They migrated, and the men intermarried with the local women, which led to an eventual darkening of the race. This person said, what's funny with their ethno-racialism is that darker Sudanese who believe to be Arabs consider as inferior and persecute fellow citizens who don't identify with Arab culture and religion. Pro-Arab culture Sudanese are powerful because of the support they get from Arab countries. Now, he mentioned the support that these guys get from Arab countries, and we talked about how the UAE has been caught red-handed supplying these guys with weapons and ammunition. The same weapons and ammunition they use against the black man to drive him away from his ancestral lands. Now, like I said, the things we see happening in today, if you study history, you know that everything you see happening today, it has happened in the past. It's a continuation. It's a consequence of events that's happened already in the past that we are now coming to terms with in the present day. You see the men from the UAE, those are the real Arabs, you see, but the guys from Northern Sudan, those are the fake Arabs. Those are the hybrid Arabs. So when you see these partnerships or these alliances between the real Arabs in the Middle East and the fake hybrid mixed race Arabs on the continent, like I said, man, this is nothing new. This is nothing new, man. The UAE supplies the RSF with the tools of war, and in return, they gain access to the mineral resources or whatever they want in return, right? Like I said, mutual exchange, right? And a lot of people say that the UAE, alongside France, has a lot to do with what's going on in the Sahel with the instability, the jihadist insurgency in the Sahel, right? Also to gain access illegally to the mineral resources in the region. Obviously, Sudan and the Sahel, very rich in gold, very rich in uranium, very rich in a lot of mineral resources that are very profitable on the global markets. And just like their Arab forefathers, the Arab powers of today, especially those from the UAE, they understand that control of resources means the control of the territory. So by supporting the RSF, they are indirectly playing a role in the dispossession of black Africans, right? Just as the Arab invaders did centuries ago. These are centuries old tactics, man. Weaponizing their relationships, their alliances with these hybrid descendants, these mixed Arab Africans to keep control, to maintain control and dominance over African lands, African resources, man. Like I said, man, it's nothing new, man. It is nothing new. It's nothing new, man. These things, you could trace these things back to ancient Egypt, bro. Thousands of years ago, man. Thousands of years ago. Like I said, the black men from Sudan, they've been dealing with these invasions going back to the days of ancient Nubia, ancient Kemet, ancient Egypt. They've been dealing with these foreigners coming in, trying to invade and dispossess them of their territory, driving them out of their land. The black men, especially in that region, they've been dealing with this for as long as history has been documented. Now let's continue. This person said, the war in Sudan is an Arab ethnic genocide of black people in our lands. Slowly, the Arabs are expanding and taking over black lands as they did in North Africa. Arab hatred of blacks is historical and does not matter whether you are Muslim. They call blacks abid, which means slave. This person said, my first memory of racism was 7 years old, going back home and getting rocks thrown at me by a bunch of grown men calling me abid. Goddamn. Let's continue. This person said, Sudanese racism just doesn't make sense because you're always one living relative or a grandparent away from who you are being racist towards. That's crazy. This person said, if I wasn't North Sudanese myself, I'd actually hate you all. The fact that even war cannot rehabilitate some of you is just insane. Our people are dying en masse, and you are still fixated on establishing superiority over those blacker than you. Have we learned nothing? This lady said, I know they look black, and they are for the most part, but historically in Sudan, there's been two races, the Arab and the African. Race is a social construct, and the identifier doesn't have to be skin. In Sudan's case, it's Arabness. The colonial powers educated and developed the Arab North, and then when they left, they gave them the power, which then turned into them subjugating us. When we resisted, they genocided the prominent African tribes and expelled us from our land to take our resources. Historically, this hasn't just happened to Darfur. It's why South Sudan was liberated. There are still communities that are apart and under Sudan still being subjugated to the systemic abuse, like my home and other areas in Sudan. Now, yeah, man, we got to talk about the Arabs, man. We got to talk about the Arabs, man. Why are we so scared to talk about the Arabs? If we can talk about the Americans, the evil Americans, if we could talk about the big and the bad Frenchmen, we could talk about, the Israelis, bombarding the Palestinians. If we can talk about, the British and what they doing and all this nonsense. The British got all our artifacts in the museums and things like that. How come we can't talk about the Arabs and their hybrid offspring waging war and committing atrocities and ethnic genocide against the black man and the black woman? Why are we scared to talk about that? Because of some fake solidarity with the folks in the Middle East? Man, I don't give a fuck about them folks in the Middle East. Pardon my French, I don't give a fuck about them people in the Middle East. Not one single fuck. So, I'm going to talk about them folks on my channel. I'm going to talk about the folks on my channel. I don't got no connection. I don't got no religious ties to them people. I don't got no love for them people, bro. You know, so I'm not compromised in any form or fashion. I can speak freely. I can speak at liberty. I have the ability to speak the truth about the Arab, you know, speak authentically and uncensored. So, you know, like I said, man, in this video, we spoke about it. The UAE, you know, the men from the Middle East, they've been caught red-handed. It's been confirmed. They're one of the foreign powers that's actually exacerbating the conflict in the Sudan, right? Our people are suffering, dying, and starving. And, you know, them boys in the UAE, you know, just to enrich themselves economically, they are supporting the massacre and the bloodshed that's happening in the Sudan. And in this video, we made the historical connection from the first Arab invaders, the first Arab settlers, to the modern day, to the RSF paramilitaries in the modern day. And we also shed light on the fact that the black man in the Sudan has a history of resistance against the Arab, right? For centuries, you know, holding his ground, you know, standing 10 toes down, standing on business, right? For thousands of years, man, waves of invaders have penetrated into the Sudan, and the black man in the Sudan has stood tall still to this day. He has not moved. He's not moving. You know, they pushing him out. They're trying to push him out. They're trying to drive him out, but he's still there. He's still there. You know, black men in different parts of North Africa, they've been driven out. You know, they've been driven south. They've been driven out of the territory. You know, the Arab done set up shop. The Arab and his hybrid offspring done set up shop. But in the Sudan, the black man is still there. The black woman is still there. The black child is still there. So much love to our brothers, man. Much love to our people down there, man. It's crazy. You know, life is crazy, bro. But anyways, it's your boy Nevercard. That's Celine back in the building. Yes, indeed. Cash App in the description. Support the platform. Support the channel, man. I'm gone. Peace. Support the album.
Our
northern brothers seized our land and stole our resources. That oil belongs to us. But they took it under the pretext of jihad. They killed our children and displaced our people. They are Muslims, but they are racists. They don't acknowledge that we are Muslims.
Southerners had been Unionists for quite a long time, including late John Garang. We were Unionists, but we were forced by the Northerners to talk for separation.
Few understand the North-South dynamic like Galwak Deng. A Southerner and devout Christian, he's one of President Omar al-Bashir's closest friends, fighting on the side of the Muslim North and serving in its governments throughout the Civil War.
Some of us had been living in the North for almost 30, 40 years, but yet there is no that confidence. Whenever you live there, you just stay as a foreigner. You stay as somebody who is not a Sudanese. That is the reason why the South is not developed. It is because they look to us as different people altogether. They just want us that way, to live like this, like what you are seeing in this mud in Upper Nile. To me, it is Northerners who rejected us not to be brothers forever.
Now, if you would have left it up to the Arabs, they would have took all of Africa from us, right? They would have took the North, you know, they would have took the East, and they tried to take the West, right? But they could not take the West. Now, when it came to the black men in the west coast of Africa embracing Islam, it kind of came under different circumstances. Obviously, the pathway of military conquest, it didn't really work. The black men of West Africa were some of the most powerful, some of the most wealthy black men, some of the most warlike black men on the planet back in those times, had some of the largest militaries on the continent, had some of the wealthiest kingdoms and empires that the world has ever seen. So the Arabs couldn't just walk into the west coast of Africa and start, you know, muscling the black man out of power. I mean, the black man was sitting on all types of natural resources, gold and ivory and salt. And, you know, the black man was doing it big back in those days, man. You know, the West African man was going crazy. So, you know, it was not easy for the Arab man to infiltrate in the same way that he was able to infiltrate and gain a stronghold in other parts of Africa, especially the North. Now, when it came to the black men of West Africa embracing Islam, a lot of times it was for diplomatic reasons or economic reasons or for personal reasons. It didn't really come through jihad, you know, in most cases, right? A lot of times it was done to secure trade routes, right? If the Arabs had certain trade routes, it was more expedient to be, you know, I'm a Muslim, you a Muslim, you know, let's get money. Now, of course, you had men like Mansa Musa who were devout Muslims and established institutions and built mosques and schools and, turned Timbuktu into a center of Islamic learning. But then you had other leaders who simply did it just for economic benefit. For some kings, it was purely opportunistic, right? They weren't praying 5 times a day. The only reason they gave the appearance of converting to Islam was to secure trade routes and, ensure diplomatic relations and secure the wealth and power and influence of their kingdom. That's all it was, man. They started rocking a turban. They started talking about assalamu alaikum and things like that. But behind closed doors, man, them boys were still doing their traditional spiritual, traditional practices, man. Pouring libations for the ancestors. They were still doing their traditional thing behind closed doors. That's how you see in these nations, the traditional culture is still alive, right? While, the Islamic culture is side by side with the traditional practices, right? So the traditional practices never died out because a lot of times those kings they wasn't really Muslims for real. You had some who were devout Muslims like Askia Muhammad the Great, who was basically a jihadist. But then you had others who, it was purely to get money. It was purely for diplomatic reasons. And when it came to the topic of intermixing, like how come the Arabs weren't able to penetrate West Africa and spread their seed across West Africa in the same way they were able to do it in different parts of Africa? Right now, in certain segments of populations of West Africa, you'll see some people who carry some Arab admixture, but for the most part, even in the nations that are heavily Islamic, you'll see that these are black nations. These are black African nations controlled by black men. Right, you're not going to see a bunch of hybrids walking around dominating, in Senegal or in Guinea or in Mali or in Niger. These are going to be mainly black African men dominating these nations, right? It's not a bunch of mixed race individuals walking around in high numbers, in large numbers. And I believe that because our forefathers understood that once you start marrying off your daughters to these foreigners, things start getting complicated, bro. I'm not saying it never happened. It probably was, an Arab merchant here and there that probably got with a black woman here and there, but it wasn't a mass movement of Arabs coming in, dealing with African women, dominating the population how it was in the north, in North Africa. It did not happen in West Africa, right? The West African kings protected their bloodlines, right? They kept control firmly in the hands of the local elites. They might have married off their daughter to another African king, but in terms of allowing the Arabs to come in and deal with our women on a large scale, that wasn't really happening like that in West Africa, right? Not like how it was happening in North Africa or the East African coast. So even though Islam spread in various regions, when it came to West Africa, it didn't really have an effect on, their sovereignty and things like that, right? The West African kings were simply too powerful, and they outsmarted the Arabs, right? The Arabs were not able to outsmart the West Africans. But still to this day, the Arabs are still waging war upon the West Africans because, like I said, a lot of these jihadists in the Sahel, they also get their funding and support from, the Al-Qaeda and, these, the UAE and a lot of groups and organizations from the Middle East. So the Arab man is still waging war upon the black man in West Africa. It is what it is. Like I said, y'all want to stand in solidarity with them folks. I don't stand in solidarity with them folks, and I don't shed tears when they get bombarded and obliterated. Now, anyways, man, it's your boy Neferkari, that's Salim, back in the building, yes indeed. Cash app in the description. Support the channel, man. I'm gone. Peace.
No. Feel like I'm 75. Know that your team be full of them traders, you know that can never be mine. I'm grabbing a thought when I drive. I'm back in my zone and we on. She said that she ready to come be my wife, yeah, hoping I don't do her wrong. I gave her my word and it's bond. I'm whipping the best like a lamb. I mean no chicken and lamb. Accustomed to call me the man. I never be up on the gram. I'm keeping that way undercover. She want me to tell her I love her. I told her I'm breaking the rules. I told her we making the news. Back in my city they loving me. Standing alone I'm 100 deep. Enemy plotting and still in reach. They try to make sure that we underneath. Trying to make sure that we never make it. Coming for power, come get acquainted. Coming for everything that I wanted. Feeling like Drake, but I really wrote it. Feeling like Kendrick, I'm checking names. Gotta roll up while I go insane. Got so much stress, I've been gained weight. Stuffing these racks in this Louis case. One thing for certain, I'm about to check. Keep it 100 and nothing less. Stick with the family since day one. Had to stay down till my day come. Had to stay down, but I'm never patient. Hop on the mic and I'm motivated. Hop on the mic and I drop a classic. Haters can't see me, they copping glasses. Back in the studio making magic. Got a new tape and it's in production. Back on my business, I got a budget. Staying low key when I'm out in public. Feel like I'm 75. Know that your team be full of them traders, you know that can never be mine. I'm grabbing a thought when I drive. I'm back in my zone and we on. She said that she ready to come chicken and lamb. Accustomed to call me the man. I never be up on the gram. I'm keeping that way undercover. She want me to tell her I love her. I told her I'm breaking the rules. I told her we making the news.